Welcome to this edition of Security and Compliance Weekly. In our first segment, we're talking to Frank Price. He's the VP of Product for our sponsor today, CyberGRX. We're going to find out exactly what is CyberGRX, talk about risk management, in particular third-party risk management, and get an introduction to CyberGRX's risk management platform. In our second segment, we're going to be joined by one of my colleagues from Online Business Systems, Mr. Alan Espinosa. Alan's in charge of Online's managed security services, which primarily is helping our clients deal with logging, monitoring, detection, and response. So guess what we're going to be talking about today? Actually, I've never met a client in all my years of consulting that was satisfied with their logging and monitoring solution, which, how do you pronounce that, Scott? SIEM solution? So we're going to talk about SIEM. We're going to talk about everything that's wrong with the logging and monitoring and detection world, and hopefully we'll get around to maybe talk about some ideas of how to do things better. Got a lot to talk about today, and it could get a little bit interesting, so join us as we continue our journey of tearing down silos and building bridges on Security and Compliance Weekly.
This is a Security Weekly production. And now, it's the show that bridges the requirements of regulations, compliance, and privacy with those of security. Your trusted source for complying with various mandates, building effective programs, and current compliance news. It's time for Security and Compliance Weekly. It's the end of the quarter. You've got a mountain of compliance tasks to complete, daily requests from sales for security documentation, and an upcoming audit. You're waiting on evidence requests, and you can't find the policy you wrote last week. Compliance management is hard. Aptable Comply makes it simple. Comply is an end-to-end, purpose-built GRC platform to manage compliance. From automating evidence collection to integrating with your existing SaaS tools, Comply simplifies the hardest parts of managing compliance. Reduce manual processes and build trust with your customers. Visit securityweekly.com/aptable to learn more. The question is simple. Have any of the systems on my network been compromised? The answer is harder than it should be. Enter AI Hunter. Active Countermeasures has automated and streamlined techniques used by the best pen testers and threat hunters in the industry to create AI Hunter, a network threat hunting solution that does the first pass of a hunt for you to identify systems that are most likely to be compromised and scores the results on a scale from 0 to 100. You can then research those systems in depth with AI Hunter. Focus your valuable time on the systems that need your expertise with AI Hunter. Sign up for a personal demo today at securityweekly.com/ACM. Cyber risk and compliance automation is finally here. Legacy GRC systems cannot simplify the complex use cases and deliver powerful automation that cyber teams need. CyberSaint's integrated risk management solution ingests data from your existing tech stack, dynamically lighting up controls using patented AI. Leverage your expertise and showcase business value. Let your risk and compliance solution work for you. See why the most forward-thinking CISOs of the Fortune 500 support their teams with CyberSaint. Maximize your cybersecurity program today. Visit securityweekly.com/CyberSaintSCW.
So welcome to episode number 49 of Security and Compliance Weekly, recorded on October 27th, 2020. I'm your host, Mr. Jeff Mann, and joining me today are my co-hosts, Mr. Josh Marpet and Mr. Scott Lyons. Gentlemen, welcome.
Hello.
Oh, and I'll just let the cat out of the bag right up front. Happy birthday, Josh.
Thank you so much. I do appreciate your fond wishes. Oh,
hey,
God.
Josh.
Hey! Yay, sing for us! Sing for us!
No, there's no time for that.
Oh, hell no.
Hey, I have a couple of announcements before we get into it. Join Amit Barakat, co-founder and CEO of Perimeter 81, and our own Paul Asadorian for a technical deep dive into the problems inherent in legacy VPN technology. Is there any VPN technology out there today that's not legacy? Anyway, together they will explore solutions for the modern workforce and how momentum toward perimeterless architecture is helping redefine the future of cybersecurity. You can register for that by visiting https://securityweekly.com/perimeter81. Also, Security Weekly, in partnership with the Cyber Risk Alliance, is excited to present Security Weekly Unlocked, which will be on December 10th, 2020. It's a one-day virtual event, and it wraps up with our 15th anniversary edition of Paul's Security Weekly live on YouTube. Of course, you can also go to https://securityweekly.com/unlocked to view the agenda and register. By the way, it's free. All right, enough of that. Today we're talking to Frank Price. He's VP of Product for CyberGRX. Frank, welcome to Security and Compliance Weekly.
Hey, thanks, Jeff. It's good to be here. And, right off the top, a very happy birthday to Josh. Want to throw in my well wishes as well.
Thank you. Very much appreciate it.
Thank you. And hopefully there'll be very appropriate memes that come across on our Discord server in celebration of Josh's special day.
Oh, dear God, they're already getting bad. Oh, Lord.
So, want to jump into it with you, Frank, and learn about CyberGRX. Before we do that, let's get to know you a little bit. So tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, and how you got to where you are today being VP of Product at CyberGRX.
Sure. Appreciate that, Jeff. So essentially, I've been in security about 15 plus years, started out with Sun Microsystems, was there about 10 years, and worked on various roles, but started in identity and access management. Moved into a company called WebRoot, which some of you guys may be familiar with. WebRoot, primarily endpoint security for consumers and small and medium-sized businesses, but also ran product for them for several years. They were acquired by Carbonite. Spent time in the threat intelligence world too, with both file URL, mobile application, reputation, as well as even security training for employees, anti kind of phishing campaign type of solutions, and DNS and network protection as well. So I've got a varied security background and moved into CyberGRX in 2019, and it's great to be part of a company that's focused more holistically on third-party cyber risk, and ultimately understanding that expanded perimeter that creates for an organization, having all those different organizations you transact with.
Very good. Yeah, I'm intrigued that you came from Sun, because Sun just seems like a distant memory to me at this point. Yeah. So we like to ask all of our guests right off the bat to keep in the spirit of the theme of our show, which is the relationship between this thing we call security and this thing we call compliance. We just try to get a glimpse of where you're coming from, what your opinions are. There are no right or wrong answers, but I submit to you our hot seat question, which is simply, where do you fall on what we like to call the security versus compliance continuum?
Well, I would say that, my general motion is heavily more towards the security end of that spectrum. I look at compliance as necessary but sufficient, necessary but not sufficient for what a lot of us do in the security industry. And a lot of our customers at CyberGRX need to worry about compliance as a checkbox first and foremost. It's a great launching point to, deeper security understanding and awareness to drive the different elements of your program to get more mature. But you can't just live and sit on what's in the underpinnings of all the regulations out there, or you're going to be left behind very quickly. And that's kind of my point of view on it.
Okay, fair enough. Thank you for that insight. And we'll either encourage you or pick you apart as the conversation proceeds.
Welcome.
So CyberGRX, I guess the first burning question is, what exactly is CyberGRX, particularly the GRX?
Excellent. Yeah. So the GRX is Global Risk Exchange, and essentially CyberGRX was founded out of Colorado based on the fundamental principle that all of the varying sharing of security assessments and associated evidence validation of those assessments is a very inefficient and arduous task that most organizations despise. And if we could create a model that would share that information, kind of open arms, allowing organizations to work together and be able to complete those security assessments and share them multiple times with all of the requesters that it would lead to a lot of efficiency gains. We've evolved quite a bit since then to actually thinking about security profiles on all the organizations you transact with, and understanding in partnership with those organizations deeply, what risk that you have bidirectionally, and managing that, and reducing it.
Very interesting, and you knew it was coming. Well, the audience knows it was coming. You might know it's coming, but I'm going to throw PCI at you. PCI approaches, I think, what you guys are trying to do in a couple different ways. First and foremost, in terms of PCI requiring an annual risk assessment. So I assume that what you guys do would play into that somehow. But then probably more to the point would be, because you're focused on third-party risk, which is interesting that you've got like a whole business model based on third-party risk. Not saying I disagree with it, but that's another area of PCI that I actually spent the morning discussing with some coworkers with a customer that we're dealing with right now over basically who does what and who's responsible for what. PCI speaks about it in terms of responsibilities, particularly with regard to the DSS security requirements themselves. Is our customer doing those actual requirements, or is somebody else, some third party, doing it on behalf of them and therefore covering their compliance requirement? So if there's a question in there somewhere, it's how familiar are you with PCI, and what does CyberGRX do to help companies sort out this tangled mess of third-party relationships?
No, a great question. And first I'll start off by saying that it is interesting that CyberGRX focuses on third-party risk, but it really is born out of things like the Target breach so many years ago, which happened via a third party, and there's been so many since. Right. Nearly 60% of breaches are linked back to some third-party vendor-supplier relationship. And when you think about Target, that there you got a retailer, and one of the verticals that CyberGRX has a lot of success in is the retail industry, where PCI is, even more prevalent than maybe some other industries with the processing of card payments. My familiarity with PCI is somewhat shallow. I've taken the PCI trainings like a good citizen of any organization that does process credit payments. But what's important to CyberGRX is, we're not necessarily a compliance tool, but we give you an insight as to whether or not you are meeting certain regulatory or compliance and standards that you need to meet out there. It's kind of like a pre-SAT, if you will, to understand where you're going to do if you're getting an audit, or if you're, going through the motions of making sure you are compliant with PCI particularly, and 12.8, which is the area that talks a little bit more about those third-party relationships. CyberGRX's controls in our assessment approach map to about 75% of the coverage there, particularly 12.8.1, 12.8.2, and 12.3. We have the security assessment that covers and ensures that our organizations have those controls in place. We don't do the last two sub-controls, which I believe are .4 and 5. Those are more compliance oriented, but our privacy sections of our assessment make sure that PCI compliance is in place, and double check those aspects for our customers.
Well, any vendor that can actually speak to a specific PCI requirement that they address or don't address, as the case may be, gets 4 gold stars in my books. But I don't want to.
It's kind of impressive.
It is impressive, but I want to allow Josh or Scott to jump in. Gentlemen, do you have any questions?
Yeah, I mean, my basic question is a little argumentative, so forgive me, but assessments lie. There's my question.
Yeah, no, I mean, I couldn't agree more. So assessments are essentially self-assessments. It's, tell me about yourself, right? And, whether you're filling out a resume for a job, or you're a company filling out a security profile, or you're trying to apply for a loan and you want it to be favorable to yourself. You're maybe worried about the exposure you're going to have. What we really work on and with CyberGRX is ensuring that relationship between the customer and the third party is built on trust. And not all organizations are going to fill that out with integrity. So we have a couple of elements to combat that. One, we do full evidence validation. We can do that on site. We can do that remotely, which is more the norm right now with COVID. We can also do that in an automated fashion. We do an automated validation, which is really an AI-driven rule set to understand discrepancies. So when somebody's filling out an assessment and says they have endpoint protection in place, they later on maybe say that they don't do strong patch manage, or they have patch management in place, and later on they say they don't have good asset management. And it's like, how can you do good patch management if you don't even understand where all your assets are? A lot of discrepancy rules to call that out. But Josh, it's a real challenge, and the assessment alone is insufficient. It's much deeper experience that we need to drive towards.
So let me ask you a question. I mean, I always see anything assessment driven as Tinder or any dating site. You want to make you primp a little bit. You put your makeup on right. You're like, all right,
swipe
take a picture
right
of me
to install
looking
patch.
Down. It's any assessment is a dating site. You want to look your best on the dating site, right, Scott? So I mean,
no, totally. You totally you totally want to swipe right to understand whether or not the patch has been installed, Josh. I mean, it's just the way you do things, right?
Hey, how else do you avoid? It's not a sexually transmitted disease. What would it be? An internet transmitted disease, an ITD? But you've got to. Any assessment is a dating site. You're right. You want to make yourself look as best as possible. So then you've got a dating site sort of view of these vendors. And okay, so I've got 1,000 vendors. I look at my dating site. There's 1,000 of them out there, and they all look amazing because they've all made themselves look good. You've got an internal validation engine on your assessment. So I think you had a great one there. If they say we do patch management, but we don't have asset management, if you can't patch what you don't know about. That's a very, very well said. That rings very true. I get that one. And you've got that for every question, I'm sure, or multiple questions or whatever. But how do I determine? So the problem is that the assessment has its own internal reality, and you're validating that the internal reality of the assessment is correct. Okay, I get that. But how do I determine that the reality of the assessment matches the reality of the corporation, the company, the organization, their actual operational environment?
Yeah, no, I mean, that's a great question, Josh. And I'll start off by sticking with your metaphor there. So with most third parties, the swiping right aspect of it.
Be careful. The dating site metaphor can only be stretched so far before it becomes really bad, okay?
We know they want to pick that one best photo they had, 10 years ago to present themselves. But ultimately, when you're a newer vendor to an organization and they're making that decision on you, that's kind of that swipe right moment. Once you're in a contractual relationship with an organization, it's like you're married, right? So, maybe you don't always look your best or are presenting yourself your best. And, we have both scenarios, right? We have those new vendors for our customers that they're like, hey, I really need to understand their security posture because I need to make a decision on whether we go with them or not. It's one of the decision vectors. Or, we're addressing our backlog, as we call it, of all the vendors we're in a relationship with, and we're trying to understand. And I think you'll get different motivations based on those scenarios. But ultimately, the underlying question is how do you really know, right? An assessment, even the CyberGRX, is just a collection vehicle of, or a starting point of the security data based on a self-assessment. Looking at the evidence associated with that, looking at the validation, partnering with those organizations to go through with them and say, do you really do what you say you do? Larger organizations really understand the assessment. Even smaller organizations, they may not even understand it. So they're not trying to necessarily just present themselves the best. They're trying to basically go, how do I even function inside this assessment? I'm being asked things I don't even know about. So we understand that whole gamut is run. And that's why we're really looking at the assessment as just a collection vehicle to start that conversation. You get the data, you do the validation, you look at other things like outside-in scanning engines, which I have a whole opinion on those, but you can look at security ratings as well for another lens at their security posture. So you really need to correlate and bring a lot of different information together to build confidence. And it's all about building confidence with CyberGRX. Our whole premise is on how highly confident you are, not just the security rating or posture of an organization. The two have to go hand in hand.
I want to say
excuse me, Josh, we actually had a question come in on the Discord server from one of our faithful listeners. He's asking, is this approaching the third-party risk scorecard vendors concept, except it's through an assessment instead of an OSINT scan? Which basically is asking, I think, so what do you guys do?
Yeah, no, it's a good question. So one of the things, we look at security ratings companies that are out there, security scoring, as customer, a complementary to what we're doing, but we're actually partnering with some of those firms. We don't believe that is anything more than a starting place, and it's not a bad starting place, but there's a whole host of issues, right? How accurate is it? Are they scanning the right assets? Are their scans up to date? It's literally like relying on standing at the curb and trying to buy a house and going, I see that the roof looks a little bit dated, therefore I'm going to make a bunch of judgments about the plumbing and the electricity and the finishes inside the home. So those ratings are really nothing more than a starting point. Those combined with a deeper assessment, combined with the validation audits, combined with a whole host of other information, and ultimately some point in time, way down the road, maybe we can even get to internal sensors, like a Qualys Tenable type of situation where you can actually monitor from within and understand where your vendors or suppliers are at. The trust game isn't there today for anything like that, but CyberGRX is looking at all those elements and trying to bring them together and say, you guys are in a bidirectional relationship. We have to build trust. You're going to have to do this, much like financial credit. At some point, this could actually become a differentiator for the strongest companies out there if they have strong security posture and are willing to share what's appropriate to share.
Okay, but a lot of you're talking about this in a very holistic sense, right? A lot of companies are struggling with basic cyber hygiene, right? You're taking the approach of CyberGRX can come in and help align your third-party risk, right? What is CyberGRX doing towards helping companies achieve basic cyber hygiene to be able to be ready for something like this?
No, and Scott, that's a good question as well. So, we do focus heavily on our customers, in terms of they're the ones that need to understand their third-party network and the security risks that poses to them. But the third party themselves, if we just did something to them instead of for them, they're not going to want to play ball. So we really work on the third-party value side of the fence as well. And one element of the value is some of these assessment-based approaches might be the first time a smaller third party or in a vertical or industry that is less mature overall as a security element. This might be the first time they've really understood where they stand, and the flip side of their assessment can become their InfoSec roadmap to drive off of. So we really want to work with those third parties so they understand that they can mitigate. And if they're in a relationship with a number of customers and they work with a company like CyberGRX, they'll also be able to prioritize. Not that their priorities should be swung and driven by their customers, but their customers are going to have a voice in that, driven through their sales team regardless. So their customers can come in and basically say, hey, we're all looking at this together, and we believe that this third party needs to focus, data at rest, and we need some better encryption there and some better solutions. And you're really gapped there. So there are different things we're doing for the third parties to help them improve on that journey. It's not just about judging them and not letting them have a voice in the process.
Interesting.
So, my question is, this is a service offering. This is something that customers sign up for. Is it intended to be sort of a once during an evaluation period type of assessment, or do you guys do ongoing things and then like set off alerts and rockets and stuff if all of a sudden a third party has this huge glaring hole that's discovered?
Yeah, primarily security assessments are, a once in a while, an annual event. But for organizations, organizations like maybe ADP that's doing, payroll processing, they're getting hit with thousands of these a year. So it's pretty much a day in, day out, deluge that they're getting into their security team. Our goal is to make it a continued event. We do have something set on an annual timer, but overall, like you would, occasionally update a profile on LinkedIn or Twitter or any of your social media sites, we want the third parties to engage and keep that data fresh. The minimal requirement is really if somebody were to come in and just, go through and address the deltas on an annual basis. But the best third parties are going to, update when they've done a mitigation, update something, if we have new content because the threat landscape has changed and we've got some new questions to ask them, they'll come in and engage on an active basis.
I've got a question for you. So Company X fills out their assessment. They do a great job. It's internally consistent. It actually meets reality. I'm not going there again. We already had that discussion. But then they've got 5 different vendors or value chain partners that need that same assessment. Do they fill it out once for you and then tell you, hey, give it to these 5 people? How does it work?
Yeah, no, that question's right in our wheelhouse because that's one of the underlying premises of CyberGRX. You complete a set of click box based on a SaaS platform questions. Those are standard, for every third party. There are different tiers to that. We have 3 tiers there. And then you can share that multiple times. Everybody who's on the CyberGRX platform will ask, that of a vendor. They can just automatically click a button and share it. All they have to do is authorize. It literally takes seconds. The other thing they can do is what we call upstream share it, which is for somebody that is not familiar with CyberGRX, when they are asked to fill out a bespoke spreadsheet or to submit in, a SOC or a SIG based assessment, they can share that proactively with them. And for those clients and customers, if they have a portfolio of vendors or suppliers with us, now they've got something you can't get with static assessments. You now have a rich structured data set that all sorts of analytics and insights can be driven off of. And now you can do a whole host of things at a program level, which is not possible with almost any other solution where you literally have a junkyard of PDFs sitting around that you can only have one-to-one conversations with.
I'm not laughing at you. I know exactly what you mean by that. So a little bit off topic, but it's on that same topic. Have you heard of the DBOM initiative or the DBOM consortium?
No. Yeah, maybe you can give me a little background on that.
Oh, okay. Sorry. Left field, I realize. I apologize. But you familiar with software bill of materials?
Yes.
Okay. So there's a new piece from the Linux Foundation called the DBOM, the distributed bill of materials. And basically, it's a way to share information and keep control over the information. So I was wondering if you guys were involved in that. And a little bit of a tip, you're not, I'm fairly sure, because Red Lion, Scott, and my company is actually a founding member of the DBOM consortium. Disclaimer, we're involved in it because we want to do compliance on that platform. But I think you should definitely take a look at that.
Yeah, we're not involved as far as I know today. I can certainly check with some of my peers at CyberGRX, but ultimately, any of the organizations out there that are working towards, kind of a shared model is something that we're game to have a conversation with. We are definitely in the interest of, helping security and risk practitioners save a ton of time, save a lot of money and headache, and not have to, basically answer and respond to the same thing over and over again with a horse of a different color approach. But essentially, it typically is 90% apples to apples if you really held those all up against each other. So specific to the bill of materials one, though, I'd love to learn more about that one.
No, absolutely. Definitely we'll have to get in touch with everybody. It's backed by Unisys and Siemens and a whole host of other people and Linux Foundation Energy Group and things like that. So I think it'd be a great addition to the team there. I really do. But I've got some more. So, you've got a way to share assessments to make my life as a security leader much easier. Scott was over at CISO Track, Scott?
Yeah, with Ian Amit. Yeah.
Ian Amit, right. And one of the biggest things, they had 50 CISOs in a room, and one of the things they said was, stop sending us the damn spreadsheets. So my question to you is, you've got a way to make it easy. I do it once, not not 40 times a year or whatever it is. But I mean, what do you see anything new coming down the horizon? What comes after all the spreadsheets, after all the assessments, after all the questionnaires?
Yeah, no, that's a strong question there too. One of the things that I see is, and it's a buzzword obviously, but it is really hinges on kind of what I would call maybe predictive assessment. The ability to look at an industry, to look at the size of an organization, maybe to look at the region of the world they're in, and know right out of the gate where they likely stand within a certain band. Be able to predict where their security posture is, and then have that be a starting point for the conversation. Have them go in and maybe complete something and say, hey, we kind of see that you're in retail, you're a smaller player, you're North American based, and we've seen the band of security posture for those organizations really be tight in kind of a lower middle maturity. And being able to kind of do that predictive analysis and allow that to be an introductory point for the third party, or allow for an organization to say, hey, if those third parties don't want to participate, we're going to look at them through that lens as a starting point. That's one element I see. And another one I referenced earlier, which is at some point, allowing, more access to that security hygiene information. If you do a parallel to financial risk data, we've all come to accept that if you're going to buy a home, apply for a loan, or if you're a small business trying to get some financing, that they're going to look at a whole host of information, and you're far less guarded about that because it's just the cost of doing business. And in some ways, you look at that as an advantage. Get my credit rating up. Get my, pay my bills on time. Have really good, clean, financial records. We want security teams to feel like that too, and feel like that's the end game here, where we're heading. That it can be a competitive advantage. It doesn't have to be, something that we're super guarded about. As long as we transact securely, because obviously we don't want that type of information getting out to the bad actors.
Hey, go ahead, Josh. Sorry, my bad.
Yes, yeah, that's okay, Scott. I'm sorry to cut you
Jeff,
off.
Sorry.
I'm curious, and this is not meant to be a trick question. I'm curious when you're doing your thing, looking at the various third parties that a company gives you. Here's our list. Are you doing it against sort of a generic measuring stick, as it were, or do you have the ability? Does a customer have the ability to pick and choose? We want you to look at this set of third parties associated with our SOC 2 audit that we're doing, or we want to look at this in association with we've got HIPAA responsibilities, or wait for it, PCI.
Yeah, no, our original questionnaire structure for the assessment was based on the NIST framework. So It's not a one-to-one map, but we can actually map our assessment, and we typically find that we have between 80 up to 99% coverage of the standard frameworks that you're mentioning out there. Not so much PCI, but the security frameworks. I talked about PCI.
It's kind of a trick question because all the frameworks are roughly the same. I mean, they're looking for the ballpark. Scott, real quick, ask your question, and then unfortunately we need to wrap.
Yeah, no worries. Thanks, Jeff. So one of the things that we were talking about earlier was cyber credit score, right? How would CyberGRX be able to affect a business's credit score, even as far as cyber goes, either now or down the future, when it's actually decided what a cyber credit score actually means?
Yeah, I mean, the term cyber credit score, in my point of view, is most closely tied to security ratings, which essentially are public asset scanning points of view. And it goes back to my analogy about standing on the curb and judging the home. I really look at those, as I said earlier, as a starting point to the conversation. I mean, they're typically not very accurate. They're typically not what you really want to lean on in your understanding. If I was an organization and a deal or a relationship hinged on somebody looking at that, I would cry foul very, very quick, and they should. But when you look at that in context with a deeper assessment, validation and evidence collection and audit, and you put that all in the mixing bowl, you can have a correlation of data where there could be some elements of that are powerful for a CISO's organization to understand a third party. So that's kind of how we look at it. If used in the right way, there's some value there. If used independently and solo, you're gonna be left pretty disappointed, and you're gonna piss off an organization that's being judged from afar.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, Frank, I appreciate you taking some time today to come on and share with us about what you're doing at CyberGRX. And also I want to thank, obviously, CyberGRX for being a sponsor of today's show. If you want to learn more about CyberGRX, and also if you want to sign up for a free trial of their risk management platform, you can go to securityweekly.com/CyberGRX and learn all about the details. So thank you very much. Thank you, Frank, and we'll be right back.